Let's go.
Thinking about moving to St. John's, Newfoundland, but you're not sure which area is actually worth it? This is where a lot of relocating buyers get stuck, because from the outside, everything kind of gets lumped together. We have St. John's, Mount Pearl, Paradise, CBS, Torbay, Galway, downtown, East End, West End. It all starts to feel like one big map with just different house prices. But when you live here, these places are not the same. Some areas get a lot of attention because they look good online, have newer homes, or sound like the obvious choice. But once you factor in price, commute, parking, winter driving, maintenance, schools, lifestyle, and what your actual Tuesday morning looks like, the value is not always as clear as people think. And then there are areas that buyers overlook because they don't sound exciting enough. They don't photograph as well, or they don't have the same reputation. But they quietly give people a really good lifestyle. So in this video, I'm breaking down the 3 most overrated and 3 most underrated areas in the St. John's Metro right now. Plus, one bonus pick at the end that is somehow both. And before anyone gets fired up in the comments, overrated does not mean bad. Some of these places are great. Overrated just means the price, the hype, or the expectation does not always match real life for every buyer. Underrated does not mean cheap either. It means people may not be giving that area enough credit for the lifestyle it offers. My name is Ryan Elliott, and I'm a realtor here in St. John's metro area, and I grew up here. I'm in these neighborhoods every day with buyers relocating from Ontario, Alberta, BC, Halifax, and other parts of Newfoundland. And this is not the every area is amazing, you can't go wrong pitch. That doesn't help you. The real question is not what is the best suburb. The real question is which area actually fits your life, your budget, your commute, and what you want your day-to-day to feel like. So let's get into it. The first overrated area is Galway. I know this one will probably get people talking. Galway is not bad. Galway is actually a very impressive area in a lot of ways. It is newer, it's clean, it has easy access to shopping. I mean, Costco is right there. The highway access is strong. The homes are newer and beautiful. The area feels planned, and for a certain type of buyer, it makes complete sense. If you're relocating from a bigger city and you want something newer, polished, convenient, and close to shopping, Galway can feel like an obvious choice. But that is also why I think it can be overrated, because a lot of people see newer and automatically assume it's better, which is not always true. Because a lot of people see newer and automatically assume it's better, and that is not always true. With Galway, you are often paying a premium for newness, convenience, and future potential. That may be worth it for some people, but you need to understand what you're actually buying. You are not buying an old, mature neighborhood with big trees, established schools around the corner, and decades of community identity. You are buying a newer West End lifestyle that is still developing. It's still in that construction phase. For some people, that's perfect. For others, it feels like a little more commercial, a little more car dependent, and a little less like the version of St. John's they pictured when they decided to move here in the first place. And ultimately, that is the tension with Galway. It looks like the safe choice from away, but the safe choice is not always the right choice. If you want newer construction, convenience, highway access, and easy shopping, Galway should absolutely be on your list. But if you're moving to Newfoundland because you want character, mature streets, walkability, ocean feel, or a more established neighborhood rhythm, Galway may not give you what you think you're coming here for. The first underrated area is Mount Pearl. And I say this as someone who grew up in Mount Pearl, so I fully understand why people overlook it. On paper, Mount Pearl is not the sexiest answer. It does not have the oceanfront marketing of CBS. It does not have downtown character. It does not have the shiny new feel of Galway. It is landlocked, built out, and people sometimes talk about it like it's just this practical middle child of the metro area. But that is exactly why I feel Mount Pearl is underrated. For real life, this place works. You have schools, recreation, sports, shopping, trails, quick access to St. John's, quick access to Paradise, access to major roads, and a very functional day-to-day lifestyle. If you're raising a family, Mount Pearl can make a lot of sense. If you're relocating and you want your week to feel manageable, Mount Pearl again can make a lot of sense. If you want to be close to things without paying for the trendiest address, Mount Pearl deserves. If you want to be close to things without paying for the trendiest address, Mount Pearl deserves a serious look. The mistake people make is that they confuse not exciting with not valuable. Those are not the same thing. Mount Pearl may not be the area that makes someone from Ontario say, wow, this is exactly what I imagined Newfoundland would look like. But after living here for 6 months, that person who chose Mount Pearl may be saying the one thing. But after living here for 6 months, the person who chose Mount Pearl may be saying, actually, my life is easy here. And I mean, that matters. The second overrated area, downtown St. John's. Now, I know downtown is not technically a suburb, but for relocating bars, this has to be part of the conversation because downtown St. John's is one of the most romanticized areas in the whole market. People see the colorful row houses, the harbor, the restaurants, the character, the walkability, the old streets, and they think that's the Newfoundland lifestyle that I want. And for some people, rightfully so, it totally is. Downtown can be amazing. If you want character, restaurants, coffee shops, nightlife, older homes, and that classic St. John's feeling, downtown can be a great fit. But it is also one of the easiest areas to overrate if you're buying from away. Because the postcard version is not the whole version. You need to think about parking. You need to think about the hills. You need to think about snow clearing. You need to think about the older construction. You need to think about moisture, basements, windows, roofs, electrical, heating, and what it actually costs to maintain a character in one of these old homes. You also need to think about your lifestyle. Do you actually want downtown living every day, or do you just like the idea of it? That is a huge difference. If you're single, working downtown, love restaurants, don't mind older homes, and want that walkable lifestyle, downtown may be perfect. But if you have 2 kids, 2 vehicles, hockey gear, a dog, and you're imagining easy parking in a big yard downtown. But if you have 2 kids, 2 vehicles, hockey gear, dog, and you're imagining easy parking in a big yard, downtown might punish you pretty quickly. That is why I call it overrated for relocating buyers. Not because it is bad, but because it is very easy to fall in love with the look before understanding the lifestyle. The second underrated area is Cowan Heights and Kilbride. These areas do not always get the same hype as downtown Galway or some of the newer subdivisions, but for these areas do not always get the same hype as downtown Galway or some of the newer subdivisions. But for a lot of buyers, they are quietly strong. You get mature neighborhoods, practical access, family streets, parks, schools, and a location that works well for just about anybody in St. John's without feeling like they're in the middle of everything. Cowan Heights especially has a very established feel, and Kilbride gives you the West End access with a little more of a tucked away residential feel depending on where you are. And for buyers who are trying to balance lifestyle, price, commute, and long-term resale, these areas can make a whole lot of sense. They're not always flashy. They're not always the neighborhoods people search for when they are sitting in Ontario looking at listings online. But when you actually start touring homes, they can surprise you. This is where I think a lot of relocating buyers need to slow down and ask better questions. Instead of asking, where is the coolest area? Ask, where does my week actually work? Where is school drop off? Where is work? Where are groceries? Where are sports? Where is the highway access? Where can I get a house that makes sense without stretching just for an address? And for a lot of people, Cowan Heights and Kilbride deserve more attention than they get. The third overrated area is Paradise. And again, I want to be clear, Paradise is not bad. Paradise has grown for a reason. It has newer homes, young families, recreation, schools, trails, and a lot of people just love living there. The town of Paradise describes itself around family-friendly amenities like schools, community centers, parks, walking trails, and sports facilities, and that is a real part of the appeal. But the reason I call Paradise overrated is because some buyers think of it as the cheaper, easier alternative to St. John's. That version of Paradise is not always accurate anymore. Paradise has grown a lot. Prices have moved, traffic patterns matter. Some areas feel more convenient than others, and depending on where you are, you may not feel as connected to St. John's as you first expected. For some buyers, Paradise is exactly right. If you want a newer family home, a suburban feel, recreation, and you're okay with the commute and a car-dependent lifestyle, it can be a very good fit. But if you're moving here thinking Paradise is automatically better value just because it's outside city St. John's, you need to be careful. Outside the city does not always mean cheaper. Newer does not always mean better. And family friendly does not automatically mean it fits your routine. This is where people need to look at the specific street, the commute, the school zone, the road access, and what their life is going to look like in February, not just on a sunny day in August. Paradise works really well for the right buyer. But I'm just going to say I do think some buyers over-assume the value. The third underrated area is Torbay. Torbay is one of those places that does not always get looked at early enough by relocating buyers. It is close enough to St. John's to stay in the metro conversation, but it gives people a very different feel. You can get more of that coastal, rural edge, space-oriented lifestyle without feeling like you've completely left the city behind. For certain buyers, especially people working remotely, people wanting more privacy, people who like trails and coastline, or families who want a quieter feel, Torbay can be a really interesting option. The town of Torbay had a 2021 census population of about 7,800 people, so it's not a tiny outport, but it still has a very different feel than the St. John's core. The reason I think it is underrated is because a lot of people relocating here start with St. John's, they start with Mount Pearl, Paradise, and maybe CBS, and they forget to seriously consider the northeast side of the Avalon. But Torbay can give you something that is harder to find in the city. More space, more quiet, more of a coastal community feel, a little more separation from the traffic and density. But of course, there are trade-offs. You need to be okay with the drive. You need to think about the weather exposure. You need to understand services, road conditions, school routines, and how often you actually need to be in the city. Torbay is not for someone who wants to be 5 minutes from everything, but if you are moving to Newfoundland because you want a bit more breathing room and you do not need the most urban version of St. John's life, Torbay may be more worth considering than people realize. Now for the bonus pick, the area that is somehow both overrated and underrated, Conception Bay South. CBS is one of the most interesting areas in the whole metro because two things can be true at the exact same time. CBS can be underrated by people who dismiss it as too far out. It can be overrated by people who assume the coastline automatically makes it the best lifestyle choice. The town is the second largest municipality in Newfoundland and Labrador and had over 27,000 residents in the 2021 census. So that is not some tiny area on the edge of the map. CBS has coastline, has trails, family neighborhoods, ocean views sometimes, more space, and a very real community feel. For people who want to stay connected to St. John's Metro but do not want to feel like they live in the city, CBS can be a very fantastic fit. If you're raising kids, working remotely, retiring, or looking for more of that coastal daily life, CBS can make a lot of sense. But CBS is also spread out. Topsail, Chamberlains, Manuels, Long Pond, Foxtrap, Kelligrews, Upper Gullies, Lawrence Pond, and Seal Cove do not all feel the same. Some parts are closer and more convenient, and some parts feel further out. Some parts are more coastal, while some parts feel more suburban. Some parts feel more rural. So when someone says, should I move to CBS? My answer is usually, which part of CBS are we talking about? And that is what makes it both overrated and underrated. It is underrated if you want space, coastline, and community, and you are willing to accept the drive. It is overrated if you think every home in CBS gives you ocean views, easy commuting, and better value just because it's outside of the city. CBS is not one decision. It is a bunch of small decisions inside one town. And that is why buyers need more context. So let's recap. My 3 overrated picks are Galway, downtown St. John's, and Paradise. Not because they are bad areas, but because buyers can sometimes overpay for the idea of them without fully understanding the day-to-day trade-offs. My 3 underrated picks are Mount Pearl, Cowan Heights and Kilbride grouped together, and Torbay. Not because they are perfect, but because they can offer a better real-life fit than most people expect. And the bonus pick is CBS because it can be either one, depending on which part you choose and what kind of life you want. That is really the whole point of this video. The best area in St. John's is not the one with the most hype. It's not always the newest area, the prettiest area, or the most expensive area. It's not always the newest area, the prettiest area, or my God, it's not always the newest area, the prettiest area, the most expensive area, or the area that looks best in the relocation video. The best area is the one where your real life works. Your commute, your kids, your budget, your house, your parking, your winter driving, your grocery runs, your weekends, your sense of community. That is what actually matters. So if you're thinking about moving to St. John's, Mount Pearl, Paradise, CBS, or Torbay, or anywhere in the surrounding area, reach out and tell me where you're moving from, what kind of lifestyle you want, and what you're unsure about. Because sometimes the area that looks perfect online is not the right fit. And sometimes the area you almost skipped is exactly where your life would work best.
Let's go.